WJC family, it is time for our weekly Torah Talk. This week in Shul, we will be reading Parshat VaYera, the second installment of the exploits of Avraham and Sarah as they travel through Canaan. And we read a bunch of very interesting episodes. Today I want to take a look at Avraham in Grar. Avraham settles in a place called Grar. The commentaries take it to be in the lands of the Philistines. So a little bit outside his regular promised home in Canaan. And he comes and he tells the people there that Sarah is his sister. It's a story we've seen before. He did it with Pharaoh in Egypt. In last week's Parsha, we'll see it again. It's something that Yitzchak, his son, copies with Rebekah when he's traveling to the land of Avimelech. And so Sarah is very beautiful. Avimelech takes her, as was the custom there, local custom, to wife. And he brings her into his tent, and that night he has a terrible dream. God comes and says, "What are you doing? This woman's married, not just to anyone, married to my prophet Abraham. And if you consummate this relationship, you will be killed and all your people will die out." We're told later he's going to close all of the wombs, quote unquote, make all of the women unable to have children. And Avimelech tells God in the dream, I'm innocent. I didn't know. And God says, yes, I agree you are innocent. And yet you need to make this right. Return his wife. And so he does, but he's upset with Abraham. He said, what did I do to you that made you assume I was so evil that I would kill you and in order to take your wife? And Abraham replies a very interesting line. He says, Vayomer Avraham, ki amarti rak ein yirat Elohim b'makom hazeh. I said to myself, there's no fear of God in this place. And Avimelech says, well, you got that wrong, right? We're actually pretty righteous people. And look, I'm a prophet now too. God came to me in a dream, gives him a bunch of wealth, and sends him on his way. I wanted to explore this story as a way of understanding how to approach the other when you are an outsider. Abraham and Sarah, they are the first real outsiders in history, as far as we know. Right? Everyone has lived together in their tribes, in their locations, and Abraham and Sarah get up and leave with their people, and now they're wanderers, and they don't have a home, and people don't really know what to make of them. Abraham is described in last week's Parsha in Lech Lecha as Ivri, right, which we think Ivrit, the Hebrew, but why Ivri? So the people in Canaan called him Ivri, we're told, because he was from Over, the other side of the river, presumably the rivers of the Fertile Crescent, where he came from in Ur of the Babylonians. So Abraham is referred to, and that, by the way, that's in the battle last week of the 9 kings that Abraham gets involved in because Lot was kidnapped. So these other kings call him Ivri, the outsider. So he's going through the world as an outsider, as somebody who's different. And he's got a natural fear of the people if he doesn't know a lot about them. And his natural fear is that these are not good people. They're not God-fearing people. And because of that assumption, he behaves, I think, in a way that is not exemplary. Right? He is told, we're told that God thinks Avimelech is innocent. And Avimelech is justifiably upset. Why did you assume the worst about me? And it's a question that lingers for us as Jews in the world today, those who are still outside of the norm, outside of the other people in the places where we live. How are we going to approach them? With the assumption that they are the worst, or with the assumption that they can also be righteous in their own ways? And Abraham's exploits here seem to be teaching us a lesson that maybe we should be a little less fearful and assume the worst about others a little bit less often. I'm reminded of a classic teaching of the Mishnah in Sefer Kedoshim, chapter 4, Mishnah 12. We're told, very, very famously, Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, Rabbi Akiva omer ze klal gadol b'Torah. Right? Treat your neighbor as yourself. This is the greatest principle of the Torah. But he's not alone. Ben Azai, who's a student of Rabbi Akiva, says, Ze Sefer Toldot Adam, Ze Klal Gadol Mizeh. This is the generations of Adam. This is an even greater principle. What kind of principle is this? Is the generations of Adam? It just introduces sort of the lineage of humanity. But that is exactly Ben Azai's point. Right? If we go back to Abraham, then we get Abraham and Sarah, then we get Rabbi Akiva's teaching. V'ahavta l'reyecha kamocha. Love your neighbor, the one who is just like you, as yourself. Is that the biggest principle of the Torah, that we should treat other Jews with respect but assume the worst of everyone else? No, says Ben Azai. No, Ben Azai says you look at the generations of humanity and recognize that we all go back to one common ancestor. Whether you believe that or not scientifically, that's up to you. But the Torah is trying to make a point when it tells us this. And the point is that we are all related. And therefore, it's not what we should do to assume the worst about our neighbors, even if they're different, even if they're the other. And this is an important principle that we're seeing play out today. Right? I'm reminded of the situation with Afghan refugees who are coming into this country now by the thousands, those who supported the United States in our effort in the war in Afghanistan, the 20-year military operations in Afghanistan, and who are now fleeing for their lives. When they come here, they will be the other. They will not know the customs. They will not necessarily have the education. How will we approach them? Will we assume the worst about them? Or will we approach them as, potentially righteous people, just like Avimelech of Grar, until we know otherwise? I understand that there is an instinct, a protective instinct, to hold at arm's length and not to trust until you have reason. But is that the kind of society we want to live in? Is that the kind of society we're being taught here by Abraham and Sarah and even Avimelech, and certainly by God? This is a question that comes up again and again as we grapple as a nation, as a local community, with immigration. The Afghan refugees are maybe an easier topic to approach because we are in part responsible for them needing to flee for their lives. But so too, immigrants coming from all over the world, from South America and Central America and Mexico, from other places where people are persecuted or are looking to start a new life here in America. America opened up for us, the Jewish people. There were very, very few of us here at the founding of the United States. Some, but very few. And certainly not, if you go back a few hundred years before that, there were no Jewish people here, just as there were no Europeans here. And yet this became a home for us. And in part, that was because the society allowed it. It did not assume the worst about the Jews, although plenty have over history. Here in America, that was not the case. And I think it's up to us to make sure that's not the case for others as well. V'ahavta l'reyecha kamocha, love the one who's just like you as yourself. That's a great principle. Who am I to disagree with Rabbi Akiva? But we shouldn't forget the teaching of Ben Azai, that there is a principle even greater than that. And that's that all of us have the potential to be in awe of that which is holy, to be righteous and It might take building bridges. It might be getting over different cultural ways of expressing that. But that is our job now. That is our role in as the peoples of the world shift for all kinds of reasons, because of political persecution, because of climate change, because they're seeking a better life for their family. Our role is to make sure that we remember, just as Abraham was reminded in Parshat VaYera, that let's start with assuming the best. Carefully, sure, but presume the best until we're told otherwise, because that's the kind of world, that's the kind of community, that's the society we want to help foster and that we want to live in. Shabbat Shalom.